Hey everyone, we have the tier list for patch 13.24 here. This is going to be on the new patch that released on Wednesday. In the S tier, we have Fast 9, Crowd Divers, and Country Reroll. And then in the A tier, we have Annie, Corki, Pentakill, and Katarina Reroll. So we have a bit of a balance. We have some 4 costs and Crowd Divers and Pentakills. We have the Fast 9 still, and we have a bunch of reroll comps. And then in the B tier, a lot of the 4 costs and some of the comps that got nerfed are in here. Twisted Fate Disco, Rapidfire Caitlyn, Misfortune Reroll, KDA, Yasuo Reroll, Heartsteel, Emo, and then in the C tier, these are like the do not plays. These are Olaf, Akali, Karthus, Seraphine, Punk, and Ezreal Bruiser. So let's get into how to play each and every single one of these comps. Let's start off with Fast 9. So for Fast 9, this is like one of the few comps that didn't really change. It's still very, very strong. You just have to follow the leveling pattern that you see here to get to 9 as quickly as possible. So a lot of people are wondering how to play Fast 9. So the way you want to do it is if you do get an econ augment, that's obviously going to be really great so that you can expedite your journey there. But one trick I found that's helped me a lot is being able to switch out your headliners and being able to fit something to your board. So I know that sounds really vague, but that's the truth to it sometimes. So in the early game, if you have like a bunch of 2-star tanks, if you get like a headliner in the back line, that's going to be really good. And then like, let's say in the mid game, you get some free upgrades in your backline, switch your headliner into like a tank headliner instead. Obviously, something that matches up with your trades is going to be really, really good, but that doesn't really happen all the time. The trick to getting to Fast 9 is to do it as efficiently as possible. So sometimes you don't have to win every single round in order to make it there. Sometimes by saving gold by picking and choosing your headliners very carefully and swapping them in and out, you're able to save a ton of gold and then you hit level 9 faster, then you finish your whole board really quickly, and then you get to that point maybe like 2 to 3 rounds earlier than other players. I know that's not all to it. You can read the entire how to play section down here on bunnymuffins.lol/meta, and then once you do reach level 9, just play any legendaries you could get your hands on. We pretty much have all of them over here. You could also play stuff like Jhin and Kayn if you manage to get them and have good items for them. So pretty much whoever you get, you're probably going to be playing them, and you also want to mix and match the items on them too. Jhin likes the attack damage items and a mana item. Kayn likes AP items. We also have a bunch of other item recommendations down here in case you don't get exact items. And keep in mind, for legendaries, you don't need exact items. It's just going to be whatever you find. So next build up we have is going to be the Crowd Divers, Zed, and Yone. This is going to be one of the newer comps that's going to be played right now, so it just revolves around having a ton of Crowd Divers, and then you could go for either Zed or 3-star Yone. So if you go for 3-star Yone, go at level 7 and then slow roll for him 3-star. If you're going more for Zed, play like standard 4-cost build and then go for Zed instead at 4 costs, and then sometimes you can add in like Viego also. For items, you definitely need an Edge of Night. It's going to be the best defensive item. Other options are going to be like Quicksilver, maybe like a Sterix Gauge, but Edge of Night, probably going to be the best one. Next up we have is Armor Shred. Armor Shred is very important. You could do it through either an Even Shroud or a Last Whisper. There are a couple of other ways to get it, such as through like an Augment, or even like a Lucian reduces armor as well, but it's often just easiest to build a Last Whisper. The most popular way to play this comp is going to be to Fast 8 with a 4-cost board, and then you hit level 8 around 4-1 or 4-5 depending on how your econ was earlier on in the game. For headliners, you want Yone, Zed, or Kiana, and you definitely want to try to go for the Crowd Diver one. But if you can't, getting the other one is okay, because at the end of the day, you can't pick and choose every single thing you get in TFT. The core of the build is going to be just like 4 or 6 Crowd Diver, 3 Edgelord, 3 Pentakill, and 2 Sentinel. And then 4 augments. Healing augments are really, really good. Because you're frontline units, you can pretty much save a whole item on them and put something else on them. Put on like a Giant Slayer, for example, and take out the healing item if you do have a healing augment. So that's one thing that's like super, super good in these types of builds. Next, we have a little tip for Crowd Divers, and that is do not frontline your Crowd Divers because they increase in damage for each second that they are alive. So that's why we have them in the second row here. It's not just to protect them. Sometimes with melee carries, people do that pretty often, but for Crowd Divers, it goes doubly important because you want them to stay alive as long as possible to get as big of a buff as possible. Next up we have is Country Reroll, still a very powerful build right now. You're going to do a 3-cost reroll pattern for this, so Samira, Urgot going to be your main focus, Thresh as a main tank, and then some backup units just for synergies, such as Amumu and Vex for Guardian and Executioner. This comp did get nerfed a little bit because Hecarim got nerfed a bunch, but overall it's still going to be very, very good. So the best way to go for this is with a country opener, such as having like a headliner country or a Samira or Urgot in your early drops, and then you start itemizing them right away. This comp does get outscaled later on, so winning in the early game is super duper important because a lot of times the level 9 boards are able to demolish you late in the game. Next build up we have is going to be the Annie Reroll comp. It's probably the best 1-cost reroll comp in the game right now. And the build is pretty much the same from last week. You just want mana items plus the Nashor's Tooth on Annie, so Shojin plus Nashor is going to be great. And then the third item she gets is going to be from the Superfan. So you're running Kennen, Lilia, and Nico. That's going to give you Superfan, and you're running KDA from the Seraphine. So if you do get KDA hexes, just place your units on them as best as you can. Not everyone has to be on it, but try to get as many as you can. Main tanks are going to be Echo and Nico. You can put on like the generic tank items on Echo and then the utility items on Nico. And then if you do get extra items for damage, I guess you could put it on Seraphine, but they're really not going to do much. So after you get 2 Annie items, really focus on the tank items after that. To do a 1-cost reroll, you could check out the leveling guide at bunnymuffins.lol, going up to the top by clicking that button and then clicking on leveling. But if you don't want to do that, we have like a small guide over here. You pretty much do not level up in the early game, and then at level 4 on stage 3-1, roll down to 30 gold, and then slow roll after that at level 5. Then once you get Annie to 3-star, just level up, add in new units, and then that's going to be pretty much your game after that. Also, for Headliner, it's highly preferred to get Emo Annie. If you do manage to do that, you don't need to play this Amumu, which saves you a lot of gold. One little tip for Annie is that she cares a ton about casting, so if you ever do make it to the late game and you're replacing your Spellweaver, add in a Sona, and that way you could add the attack speed bonus with Sona to make your Annie attack even faster so that she casts even faster and then gets online and demolishes the enemy team. Next build up we have is going to be the Corki Reroll build. So Corki Reroll is another 1-cost reroll, not as good as the Annie, but definitely not anything to scoff at. For Corki, you just want generic attack damage items plus the Rage Blade for attack speed. Get like a Last Whisper on another unit such as Kai'Sa, and then just play a bunch of big shots in 8 bits. Nothing really too much to worry about there. Obviously, you want Headliner Corki. You prefer 8-bit, but if you get big shot, that's good too. So you could have like 4 out of 4 big shot or 4 out of 4 8-bit, doesn't really matter. And then have some sort of sentinels in the front line. Obviously, if you get the portal, what's it called? Like, I think it's called Showtime, where headliners get both of their traits. It's extremely good for this type of build. For spatula holders, any of the big shots in the back would do really well with it. So Kai'Sa, Misfortune, Ezreal, Jhin is another good one. And then after that, you just throw random tank items on your front line. So that could be either Echo, Mordekaiser, or Garen. Pretty much, since it's a 1-cost reroll build, follow the same leveling pattern as the Annie, or read up on the full thing over here on the website. Next build up we have is Pentakill. This is a very powerful comp right now. Viego is surprisingly strong, and you can match him up with a lot of different things. So 7 Pentakill is going to be the main core of the build. Unlike most other comps, Pentakills actually run pretty decent units, or like expensive units. You know how when you go for like a 7 trait, sometimes you have to include like 2 1-cost units, for example? Well, with Pentakill, you could reach 7 without even having any 1-cost units, so that's really good. That means more people are doing stuff. And then you could cap out your team in the super late game with Yorick. But for this build, you want to do a standard leveling pattern, do like a fast 8 if you can, roll for Viego and Karthus, and then try to itemize both of them. You could also do Zed also. So if you have a ton of attack damage items, itemize Zed. If you have a ton of ability power items, put them on Karthus. But you pretty much always want to be itemizing Viego right now. Some good item holders in the early game are going to be like backline carries. So you could have like Senna and Corki hold on to a lot of Viego's items or Karthus's items. So for the item holders, backline carries are really good for this because Senna and Corki and other units can hold both Viego and Karthus items because he kind of uses like the generic damage items, not anything like that specific to frontlining. Obviously, he still makes great use of them, but you could also use frontline carries as well. Pretty much anyone is a good item holder for this build. After that, for your spatula holders, other edgelords are going to be great options, or you could use like Zed, depending on what emblem you get. Like if you get Pentakill, obviously put it on Zed, and that way you could drop like Kale and add in a different unit. Honestly, a lot of different things you could do with this comp. For example, you could drop down to 5 Pentakill, add in some legendary units. That's really popular to do right now in the late game because 5 costs are just still very powerful. So keep that in mind as you're going through this list. All the comps you see, you don't have to play them the entire game, unless it's like a reroll build that you like sacrifice your whole econ for, because a lot of times you just play a comp in order to reach fast 9, and then switch to fast 9 at the very last moment. But next build up we have is Katarina Reroll. Very decent comp. It pretty much only revolves around Cat and then the other crowd divers, so if you do get leftover items, like drop him on Yone for example, but he's not really going to carry you to like super victory without edgelord. So if you don't have cat items, I do not recommend this build, but if you do, obviously it's going to work out pretty well, and then you have Zed in the late game too. Items for her is going to be Jeweled Gauntlet, Double-Handed Justice. It's not just like a very strong item combo on her right now. But in case you wanted to find out some other item options, you could always go to teamfight.lol, go on stats and then champions and click into them and then see a bunch of other item recommendations down here. For example, here we see that Rabadon's Death Cap does surprisingly well on Cat, so you might as well try building that out in some games. But for this comp, you want to follow a 2-cost reroll pattern. We haven't really covered that yet, so you'll want to click into here, takes you to the leveling guide, and then you're like, hey, I'm gonna do not roll on stage 4, do not roll on stage 5, and then at level 6, around stage 3-2 or 3-5, you slow roll, and then you roll down to 50 gold every single turn. In case you don't know what slow rolling is, you could also click on this link over here, which takes you to this page, which explains what hyper roll, reroll, and slow roll is. Or you could check out the TFT dictionary, and it has a lot of random terms that you may or may not hear me say a lot of times, but I believe slow roll is down here if we scroll all the way down, and it's all the way, yeah, right here. But let's move on into the next build. This is going to be the B tiers now. Twisted Fate, Disco Dazzler. Got hit a little bit. It's still okay overall. Again, you want to use a lot of the B tier comps to Fast 9. It's not that B tier is awful, but in the late game, they do get outscaled by all the other comps that we kind of talked about. But again, does not mean you can't use them. You could always play these and then go into a Fast 9 because honestly, the augments for the legendary board, it does not matter what you have. I mean, it does matter, but like, if you're able to just play a lot of legendaries, like they will win the game pretty easily. And then with that, you could go to like level 10 even. And then if we take a look at a comp like Twisted Fate, you just put the items on Sona and Ziggs. Like Twisted Fate uses a Rage Blade, Dazzler, you want Ziggs anyways. And then there's someone that's gonna use some of these random items that you have. Like, I don't care what you say, I don't care who you are, there's gonna be some sort of items you could put on your other champions. Because that's what legendaries kind of are in this set and every other set. They use pretty much any items, and you don't really have to build specifically for them. The only exception right now is Sona with the Rage Blade, but again, with this comp, you're building Rage Blade anyways on Twisted Fate, or you could grab it in the late game if you get a Sona 2 for free. But for this board, you want to do a Fast 8 because you use a lot of 4 costs. Blitzcrank and Twisted Fate gonna be the main stars of the show, and then for headliners, obviously you want to choose one of them, and then in the early game you could use Nami, Bard, or Lux as your item holders. Next build up we have is Rapidfire Bruiser Caitlyn. It's seen better days. Actually, not really, because this is only the second patch. But again, if you have a bunch of attack damage items, drop them on Caitlyn, and then level up later on, go level 9, put it on some of the legendaries instead, and you're going to be good to go. Fast 8 for this build because you're running 3 4 costs this time, even more. And then you could even slowly transition into the late game build from here. You don't have to like sell everything and then forget it and then go level 9 after that and roll down like 50 gold. You could like kind of build this whole board here, find like the Alawi, find like the Lucian, and then after that be like, hey, I'm still alive, I got a bunch of health, I got a bunch of gold. Maybe in the next stage I could sell my board and then go for that while keeping both Alawi and Lucian. I recommend that for people who can't like pivot their board in one turn and need like a couple turns to do it, because you're able to like take in and out a lot of units slowly over time. Next build up we have is Misfortune Reroll. So this was a very popular build in the last patch, but it got nerfed like pretty heavily. You could like check out the stats for this. I'm gonna sort by 3 costs and then sort by 3-star average placement. And then you'll see that like Misfortune's actually in the bottom of the barrel over here. So 3.97, not really that great. But you may notice that she still has a 4.34 overall, which is obviously good, right? But you have to remember that a lot of Misfortune stats are being skewed right now. What is the best comp in the game right now? It is going to be the Fast 9 comp, and they just happen to run Jazz in a lot of cases. The reason why they do that is because a lot of the Jazz units just have synergies with random 5-cost units. For example, Misfortune shares one with Lucian. Misfortune also shares one with Jhin. Bard shares with both Lucian and Ziggs, and then Lucian is just Lucian. So that's actually messing up the stats a little bit. Okay, what's the next 3 costs that kind of stands out? Well, Urgot and Samira. We rated them really highly in the country reroll, and you might be wondering why their average placement is kind of in the bottom half of the 3-cost units, but if we look at the 3-star rate over here, we see that they are 3-starred the most often. So that definitely affects their placements as well. And since a lot of people are going for it, they generally hit it in a lot of cases, and then they get like pretty decent placements. At the end of the day, if we look at every single unit over here, every one of them except for Lux is above average, because 4.5 is average, right? All right, I hope no one takes that quote out of context, but really only Lux is below average at 4.59. 3-star 3 costs are just really good, and if you end up getting it, like, yeah, you'll do really well. But the way to evaluate 3-cost 3-roll comps is going to be by looking at their play rate, because if you can't consistently 3-star them that much, then they're not really worth going that often. But Samira and Urgot both passed the data check, or whatever you want to call it, and that's kind of why they're up this high in the S tier. But going back into the other comps, we've kind of finished off with Misfortune Reroll. We're going to go with KDA Ahri Akali. I was actually surprised by this, but yeah, they're really not that good right now. They're much better comps to play, but you really can use this build to pivot into Fast 9. I think it's one of the easiest ones to do it with because you're already wanting to get Sona anyway, so if you only get Sona, it's fine. You have all the items ready for her, and then if not, you can just play this comp until you hit the other units, and then switch everything all in one turn. Also, they use a mix of a lot of different items, like tank items you could put on either Nico on Echo, AD items or frontline items you could put on Akali. A lot of the legendaries do like all these frontline items, such as like the tanks, Yorick, Kayn can use them. Who's the other one? Kiana can also use them. So pretty much any item you build in the KDA comp can be used in the Fast 9 build. So you could always use this and then pivot into the other one later. Next up we have is Yasuo Reroll. Another decent 1-cost unit. True damage is like probably hidden OP this patch. So you could play a lot of wild builds with true damage. You could do like a Senna reroll. You could even do something with Echo. But Yasuo probably going to be the most reliable if you want to try some true damage builds out right now. But I really would only do reroll Yasuo with true damage headliner. If you get the other one, Edgelord, not going to be as strong, I don't think. But I mean, anything is possible in life. But I really recommend doing the true damage version, because it's a lot easier to play. Because you really just want to max out on the true damage and then just get 3 Edgelords just to activate the trait. And that's pretty much going to be it. So Yasuo items going to be a mix of all the melee items. So like Quicksilver's good, BT's good, Titans is good. And then follow the 1-cost reroll pattern that we talked about before. Next build up we have is Heartsteel Reroll. This one going to be a little wild. You're going to be farming Heartsteels all game. I did post a Heartsteel game recently, so you can check that out on the YouTube channel. And while you're at it, subscribe if you have not already, if you found any part of this video helpful. But you pretty much just play Heartsteel and then press D until you hit everything 3-star. So like Set, Yone, and Aphelios is going to be your main focuses. And you can put kind of any sort of AD or attack speed items on them and then tank items on Set. Next build up we have is Emo Reroll. So Vex and Amumu, again, we can look back at the data checks. They're kind of in the middle ground right now. They're like in the middle of the 3-star rate, and they're also towards the bottom a bit in the 3-star average placement. So overall, like, are there better things to go for? Like, yes, of course, but like, they are in like the upper half of like the 3-star rate. Barely, but they still are up there. Are there better things to go? Yes, but if you get a lot of Vexes and Amumus, it definitely is still a viable build to kind of try for. Another thing that's kind of cool about them is that, like, I don't really think it matters which headliner you have. You could kind of use either or for both of them. So you have a lot of different outs, so that way it builds like a little bit of consistency, but not like too much. Like all the other reroll comps I kind of went over, I say like, oh, you really want like true damage Yasuo, or like, oh, you really want Emo Annie, for example. But for this one, you could kind of go either or. I do prefer the Emo versions, that way you could drop Annie. But I think both the Executioner and the Guardian one also have a lot of good uses there. Going on into the next comp we have are the C tiers. C tiers are kind of like do not play. I mean, it is a game at the end of the day. If you want to have fun, like try them out, but there are a lot better things to go for. And yeah, you could try these. It's not going to be that great though in a lot of cases. Olaf Reroll going to be the main culprit right now. A lot of people like don't even buy Olaf ever. He's not that good in the early game, and then Olaf Reroll not that good either in the mid game. Executioner Akali Karthus. You could play this maybe a little bit, but there are just better versions to go for, such as like the KDA version right now. Or just go like Pentakills with Karthus. Next build up we have is Seraphine Reroll. Much better things to go for. I've tried this one personally just to like see what happens. I did get a little unlucky that game, but like I didn't really see that much power in the comp. We could data check it, switch to 2 costs. Let's see, 3-star average placement. We have Seraphine at a 4.05, which does seem okay, but it's like a pretty low 3-star rate. I guess if you want to see what's popular, definitely like see who the highest 3-star units are, and it's gonna be like the punk units. Makes sense there because it's really easy to get. Senna's going to be the next one. Again, you can play her with like the Yasuo build or in a different true damage build. Katarina for the Crowd Diver Katarinas. And then Seraphine doesn't show up until like a couple units later. So there are better things to go for. Like, would I definitely not go for Aphelios? Maybe. I probably wouldn't go for Seraphine either, because you're never guaranteed to hit 3-star 2 cost, and then if you do, it's only a 4.05. It's like kind of a lot of risk for like not that much reward. Let's move on into the next build, which is going to be Punk Reroll. Like, you probably shouldn't play this either. Like, we were already kind of looking at this. Like, look at this. Even if you get Pantheon or Twitch 3-star, 4.74, 4.64, there are better things to go for in life. But if you really want to play with Punks, I'm not going to stop you. I hope you're in my game. Next one up we have is Ezreal Bruisers. Ezreal kind of just like in the wayside right now. They buffed him a bunch. They buffed a bunch of the 4 costs, but it wasn't enough. Fast 9 is still going to be the way to play, so that's why a lot of these are kind of in the dumpster tier right now. But let's summarize up top. Let's look at the tier list again. Fast 9, again, use all the other comps. Like, just because something's in the C tier doesn't mean it's completely useless. You could use it to Fast 9. The exceptions would be like Seraphine, Olaf, and Punk, but you could use like the Karthus build, you could use the Ezreal build, and then pivot into a better comp later on. You're never restricted to solely one thing. After that, Crowd Diver, Zed is like super duper powerful, and then Country Reroll, just like a solid comp after that, like good for top 4ing. For 1 cost rerolls, Annie and Corki gonna be the kings there. And then for 4 costs, it's gonna be like the Crowd Diver and the Pentakill comp. You could play the other stuff, but like mainly focus on like the Fast 9 again, unless you get like a really good Zed type of build, or like the Country Reroll, or like insane Annie or Corki starts. I kind of would ignore like everything else if you can help it. Like, obviously don't like completely ignore it, but maybe play it in a lot less games and just focus on like the Fast 9 right now. A lot of people have also been asking me like, how do I get better at TFT? Well, we have this little guide up here, which is in order. So if you're completely new, start here and then work your way all the way down. And those are going to be like some of the best ways to get better at TFT. But that's going to be it for me today. I'll probably come out with an augment guide as well this weekend, so I'll definitely be trying to work on that. But yeah, it's going to be another Fast 9 type of week. So I hope to see you all in game. I will be trying to stream like almost every day in the next week as well.